We live in an era where almost any comfort can be summoned with a few taps on a screen. Yet millions wake up every day and work themselves into a state of deep, bitter exhaustion, despite this technological ease. We manage this exhaustion by retreating. We turn to glowing screens, seeking dopamine from digital feeds to numb the discomfort of a long day. When we feel this burnout, we instinctively blame the volume of the work itself. This leads to the assumption that if we could only find a life of total comfort, the stress would finally disappear. Chasing a life without friction actually erodes our resilience. We lose the ability to manage the standard pressures of existence, which makes life's unavoidable tragedies feel much heavier when they arrive. Jordan Peterson points out that a simple lack of capacity for violence or danger is not the same as being peaceful. True moral strength requires the ability to be formidable, paired with the voluntary discipline to keep that power under control. Simon Sinek offers a different perspective on our daily effort. He argues that the feeling of exhaustion often stems from a lack of purpose rather than the number of hours worked. Sinek defines the experience through our motives. Hard work performed for a cause we find meaningful is what we define as passion. The physical exertion is identical, but the motive dictates whether the brain registers the activity as a threat or a goal. Effort acts as a neutral biological input. Our psychological motive serves as the catalyst that dictates whether the final output is soul-crushing stress or a sense of empowerment. Performing work that holds no personal meaning forces the brain to rely on a single, inefficient mechanism to keep moving forward: willpower. Psychological research, like the famous cookie study by Roy Baumeister, shows that human willpower functions as a finite biological resource. In a study, one group used willpower to resist fresh cookies, while another faced no restriction. Resisting temptation depleted their mental fuel tank. When later asked to solve difficult puzzles, the willpower group gave up 50% faster. We see this same depletion in the modern office. Every time we have to negotiate with ourselves to start a task we don't care about, we drain that same limited reserve. Evening burnout represents the literal depletion of a biological fuel source. We reach the end of our mental reserves because we spent the day using willpower to navigate tasks we don't value. Earl Nightingale taught that true meaning comes through a law of mutual exchange. He believed our returns in life are always in direct proportion to the service we provide to others. When you work for the sake of others, the effort feels less like a negotiation with the self and more like a necessary contribution. This sense of duty acts as a psychological buffer, allowing us to endure friction that would otherwise feel draining. Napoleon Hill argued that achieving this level of discipline requires a radical shift in identity. It involves the intentional dismantling of the version of yourself that prioritizes comfort over excellence. Adopting this new identity means refusing to negotiate with your own excuses. You stop making allowances for the habits and patterns that kept you in a state of stagnation. When hard work is tied to an identity of service, the friction of effort becomes a constructive force. The heat generated by that work is what allows a more resilient version of the self to emerge. Purpose provides the motive, but it is a fragile starting point. Without a rigid infrastructure to support it, even the strongest sense of passion will eventually fade under the weight of fatigue. We can protect our momentum by using forcing functions. These are constraints that remove the option to quit, much like the explorer Hernan Cortés ensured his men couldn't retreat by sinking the ships they arrived on. We can program our habits using if-then algorithms. Instead of deciding when to work every day, we create a rule. If it is 9 a.m. on Thursday, then I am at my desk. This removes the need for an internal debate. Using these checklists and algorithms preserves our limited mental energy. Instead of spending fuel on the decision to start, all of that energy is directed toward the execution of the work itself. These routines do not limit our freedom. They outsource the burden of discipline so that we can focus our mental resources entirely on the tasks that matter most. When our effort is systematized and aligned with a clear purpose, our internal rhythms begin to stabilize. Through consistent repetition, the act of working becomes more natural. Eventually, the brain stops resisting the exertion. the biology shifts from needing a push to start to actually craving the structure and repetition of the work. Life is difficult by design, but we get to choose how we experience that difficulty. We can let the friction lead to exhaustion, or we can provide the motive that allows that same friction to sustain our momentum. Success is not found by finding a way to avoid hard work. It is found by intentionally outgrowing the version of yourself that was ever afraid of it.